Dana White, you kind of fell off, bro. Now, there's been a narrative amongst the UFC and MMA community the last few years about how Dana White is no longer the same Dana White that we've seen in the past. And no, I'm not saying the government kidnapped Dana White and now the Dana White that we know today is a clone. I've not seen anything from my end that has made me suspicious about that theory. But what I have seen is that UFC fans online are saying that Dana White, he's washed. Now, this has been a narrative that has been building and building within the last few years, but I never really paid much attention to it because I figured it was just from the MMA crowd who nitpicks and complains about any and everything that they can find from the UFC. But as time continues to pass, they might be cooking. The Dana White that we have in the current day compared to the Dana Whites while the UFC was still on the rise are two different people, two completely different people. The younger Dana White was a lot hungrier. But seriously, he was so obsessed with the UFC and his craft, and he actually did his job promoting the sport and making the UFC the biggest and best MMA promotion in the world. But what changed and why? I believe Dana White has began to suffer from the disease that I like to call the hungry Conor disease. And this is exactly what it sounds like. Dana White has kind of gone down his own Conor McGregor arc in terms of his hunger disappearing because he simply made it, because he's achieved what he wanted. He's made the money and now he can reap the benefits from his hard work. Dana doesn't need to bend over backwards to make the UFC a global success because it already has. He's there. He's crossed the finish line. He doesn't necessarily need another Conor McGregor because he's already gotten a Conor McGregor that has made him millions, maybe even billions of dollars. He doesn't need to promote new UFC stars into global superstars like Conor because he doesn't need to. Because his investment and business venture of the UFC has paid off tremendously, Dana has decided to start from square one and create new business ventures and side projects since the UFC no longer needs him like it once has. Out of all the things Dana could have possibly created for a new side project, what did he create? Power Slap. Yeah, you really don't have to even be a fan of the UFC or Dana White to know about Power Slap. You might not know what it's called, but chances are you've definitely seen clips online because of how ridiculous of a concept it is. And to Dana's credit, that's exactly what he wants. Power Slap has gotten a wild amount of eyeballs because of how absurd it is. But does it really have dedicated fans? Probably not. No one really takes it seriously or actually cares about it because it's just so ridiculous. There's not much parody, if any, in the sport. Like, every single match is the same. It's just one guy slaps the other until they pass out. And I'm sure to an extent there's some game planning and some strategy. But like, come on, be serious. Maybe an example of a strategy in Power Slap might be to grow your beard out as like an extra layer to the slap. Like, I don't know, man. I'm just grasping at straws here. That's how ridiculous of a concept Power Slap is. But that's the thing. According to Dana, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. This man has constantly glazed Power Slap and just, you can tell he's put it on a pedestal over UFC because he wants to get it to the height that the UFC has gotten to. So he just constantly forces this Power Slap thing onto UFC fans when in reality nobody actually cares about it. Power Slap is like an extremely ugly newborn baby, but the mother just insists it's the most beautiful thing ever. Like, we don't have to lie. Power Slap would just become a huge meme among the MMA community, and even UFC fans have clowned on it. Another side project that Dana White has created and has been pursuing, Zuffa Boxing. Yes, Dana White has decided to jump into the promo world of boxing, as Zuffa Boxing was created in June of 2025 by Dana and Turkey as a joint venture. Dana's goal was to simply take over the boxing world with a mix of the things that made UFC great, like its promotional strategy and its rankings system. Now he's just going to apply that to boxing. The only issue is that, one, boxing is boring as hell in my opinion. And number two, boxing is your biggest competition, so why would you want to promote it? Dana knows boxing is on a crazy downfall right now, and he wants to swoop in and take that over like he did with the MMA world. And honestly, I don't blame him. I'm sure he could do it. But the issue is that he's putting all this money and time and resources into Zuffa Boxing when plenty of MMA fans couldn't give less of a about boxing. In my opinion, watching a boxing match compared to an MMA fight is just night and day, bro. They're two different sports, and in my opinion, I just prefer MMA. There's a lot more likely outcomes that come with an MMA match compared to a boxing fight, bro. Like, it's just, MMA just has so many different variables going into it, and I think that's why it makes it so great and entertaining compared to a boxing match. I mean, Dana is spending all of this money to sign guys like Conor Ben for just no reason whatsoever. Like, he has surely not worth all of that money for Zuffa Boxing. Maybe it's just me, but like with Zuffa Boxing, why would we care? With all these distractions like Power Slap and Zuffa Boxing that keep Dana occupied away from the UFC, it's now time to explain why the UFC is suffering from this and why many people think Dana White is not doing the best job. The lack of promotion. The UFC could do a much better job with promo than what they've been doing the last past year. It seems as if there is less advertisements and hype promotion videos about numbered events now, and they just kind of let it organically spread through social media to get the word out. I mean, you have Dana White jumping on Instagram Live and announcing these insane cards or insane main events on his phone in potato quality. Like at this point, it's just kind of become a meme, like Dana White jumping on IG Live and bro is in like 180p. Why not have a live stream on the UFC YouTube where you have a show announcing fights with actual graphics and presentation instead of you just reading off the names of the fights off a paper for 2 minutes on an Instagram live stream? I'm pretty sure they did this for the Hamzat and Sean Strickland card. They did it for something, and I don't know why they just couldn't do that for all the time, bro. Like that was so high quality and so sick. Delivering this awesome news that people are so excited for, your fans are excited for. If you could just raise the quality of that into something like a show, everyone would love that. Speaking of main events, you know, I went to the gym on Monday and I ran into two buddies and we were talking about the UFC, and one of them brought up the Islam and Ian Gary fight and how they just did not see any advertisements or promotion for it. And I'm a diehard fan, so of course I'm gonna know when these fights are happening, but as a casual fan, not many of them are actually gonna be keeping up when these fights happen until the week of. I mean, if even the casual fan is acknowledging that the UFC's promotions just might not be cutting it, it might be an issue. It's also been an online narrative that the UFC lacks superstars nowadays. There aren't any John Jones or any Conor McGregors in the sport, and to be fair, those guys were once in a lifetime fighters, right? It's very rare to see that level of superstardom, and quite possibly could be the only time we've seen guys like that at that level in the UFC. But now since they're gone, we need new faces of the UFC. Maybe not to that standard, but at least somewhat close, or someone that the UFC just promotes and you can tell that they are the face of the UFC. And there have been fighters like Alex Pereira, there's been fighters like Ilia Topuria, Islam Makhachev, Paddy Pimblett. All these guys have some pretty strong pull inside the UFC fan base and have a very, very loud fan bases of their own. But the UFC doesn't care. I think the UFC is really scared to promote these guys like they should, because they could maybe become larger than the sport itself, like how Conor McGregor once did. And when Conor McGregor did get too large, he left and went to boxing. He required a larger payday, and I just don't think the UFC wants that. I mean, this past year when Ilia Topuria became a double champ and he was the largest he's ever been in terms of superstardom, he talks about leaving to go for a boxing match, to go get a payday as a boxer. And I just don't think the UFC wants that. Now that it's an established and dominant company, the UFC just doesn't need to bend over backwards to promote these new fighters into superstars like they once had. They don't need to forge the next superstar through advertisements and promos when they could just have them fight organically, I guess. And if they become a superstar that way, then so be it, I guess is their reasoning. Now that begs the big question of today: is Dana White actually washed? I wouldn't say he's washed or past his prime, because he definitely talks about the hunger that he still possesses in the UFC, but he definitely has put the UFC on the back burner for these new side projects like Zuffa Boxing and Power Slap. He's trying his hardest to get these promotions to become the big dogs of their sport like the UFC is to MMA, and I just don't blame him for that. You know, when you start a company or start a business, obviously you want it to be the biggest and most successful you can get it to be. But when that hustle starts to affect the businesses that you've already built and affect the customers of that business, then it becomes an issue. However, I also do want to talk about the positives that Dana White has brought to the UFC within the last year. One of those positives, if not the biggest positive, was UFC Freedom 250. I mean, he went to extreme measures to pull off this event, and it was absolutely sensational. It was truly a once-in-a-lifetime event, and it lived up to the hype, and then some, in my opinion. And apparently this event lost the UFC so much money because it was so expensive to pull off. So kudos to Dana for like not being cheap and creating a generational event for UFC fans. Not to mention, he's also explored the idea of taking the UFC to the Roman Coliseum, which would be absolutely electric. This idea has been floating around on TikTok. I'm sure you guys have seen it before, the videos. I mean, dude, that would be so sick. So to see Dana actually pursue it and try to bring it to life is so awesome to see. Shout out to him. But apparently it would cost way too much money. So unless a billionaire wants to help out, Dana might have to pass on that. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is a huge UFC fan. You know, there's videos of him training with Marab. So hey, Mark Zuckerberg, if you're watching this, which I know you're watching this, Mark, how about we, pull some strings and maybe get the UFC to go to the Coliseum? You know, that would be kind of awesome. He also teased something insane, like another location as well is in the talks. And I don't think this is the Coliseum. Maybe it could be the Coliseum and this is just outdated news, but hopefully it's something different that we'll find out more info about soon. But the fact that Dana is actually exploring these new options and trying to take the UFC into uncharted territory like he did fighting on the White House, I mean, I'm glad that he's not being complacent. I don't want this video to make me sound like a Debbie Downer and one of those fans that just hates on everything UFC related, because trust me, I am far from that. I think the UFC is in a great spot right now, and obviously I'm very passionate about it, but it is hard to ignore that Dana White's side projects have started to cut into the UFC and its progression as a whole. Surely I'm not the only one that has realized this, and I'm sure I'm not. So let me know what you guys think down below. Is Dana White washed? Should Hunter Campbell be the next face of the UFC? Is it time to make that happen? Let me know, or am I just crazy?